For decades, Garth Brooks stood among the biggest names in country music, selling millions of records, filling stadiums, and building a career few artists could match. To fans, his story looked like the perfect American success story. But behind the awards, sold-out tours, and worldwide fame were painful losses, difficult choices, and personal struggles that shaped his life in unexpected ways. As the years passed, those hidden chapters became impossible to ignore. What heartbreak defined Garth Brooks' journey most? Long before the sold-out stadiums, record-breaking albums, and worldwide fame, Garth Brooks was simply a young boy growing up in Oklahoma. He was born on February 7, 1962, in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and later grew up in Yukon, a small community not far from Oklahoma City. Life in the Brooks household was built around family, hard work, and music. His mother, Colleen Carroll, had once been a country singer who appeared on television talent programs during the 1950s. Music was never far away from the family home. Almost every week, family members gathered together and performed songs. These informal family nights became a tradition. Brothers, sisters, parents, and relatives would sing and play instruments while others watched and cheered. For young Garth, these moments became some of the most important experiences of his childhood. At first, music was not his main focus. Sports captured much of his attention during his younger years. He enjoyed competition and spent countless hours developing his athletic abilities. In school, he showed talent in track and field and eventually earned a scholarship to Oklahoma State University. To many people around him, it seemed sports might become his future. But music continued pulling him back. Even while attending college, he began performing in local bars and clubs. The crowds were small. The pay was often modest. Some nights were exciting, while others were disappointing. Yet each performance helped him improve. Standing in front of strangers taught him how to command attention. It taught him confidence. Most importantly, it taught him how to connect with an audience. As the years passed, music slowly transformed from a hobby into a serious goal. During the early 1980s, country music was changing. New artists were appearing, and competition was intense. Nashville remained the center of the industry, attracting dreamers from across America. Thousands arrived hoping to become stars. Only a handful succeeded. Garth Brooks knew the odds. Still, he refused to give up. In 1985, he made an important decision. He traveled to Nashville for the first time to pursue a recording career. Like many hopeful artists before him, he arrived filled with ambition and determination. The experience was difficult. Record labels were not waiting for him. Doors did not immediately open. The city was full of talented musicians chasing the same dream. After struggling to gain traction, Brooks eventually returned to Oklahoma. For many people, that setback would have ended the journey. For him, it became motivation. He continued performing. He continued learning. He continued believing that success was possible. A few years later, he returned to Nashville with renewed determination. This time, things slowly began to change. Industry professionals noticed something different about him. His voice was strong, but that was only part of the story. His stage presence stood out. He brought energy and excitement that many country performers were not known for at the time. When he performed, audiences paid attention. When he sang, people remembered him. In 1989, his self-titled debut album was released. The response was encouraging. Songs from the album began climbing the charts, introducing Brooks to country music fans across the nation. It was not an overnight explosion, but it was the breakthrough he had been waiting for. Soon, another opportunity arrived. In 1990, his second album, No Fences, changed everything. The album became a massive success. Songs like Friends and Low Places connected with listeners in ways few could have predicted. Radio stations played his music constantly. Fans packed concert venues. Album sales skyrocketed. The young performer from Oklahoma was becoming one of the biggest names in country music. As the audience watched, Brooks transformed country concerts into major entertainment events. He moved across the stage with incredible energy. He interacted with fans. He treated every performance as if it were the most important show of his life. Crowds responded with enthusiasm. Many fans who had never listened to country music before suddenly became interested. His appeal reached beyond traditional audiences. Throughout the early 1990s, the success continued. Albums sold in astonishing numbers. Tours filled arenas and stadiums. Awards accumulated year after year. His popularity grew so quickly that even industry veterans were surprised. Before long, Garth Brooks was no longer simply a successful country singer. He had become a cultural phenomenon. His records broke sales milestones. His concerts attracted enormous crowds. His name became recognized far beyond the country music world. From the outside, everything appeared perfect. The dream that began in Oklahoma had come true. The young man who once performed in small bars had become one of the most successful entertainers in America. Yet success often brings new challenges. The larger his career became, the greater the demands became. Tour schedules grew longer. Media attention intensified. Expectations continued rising. Every album had to be bigger than the last. Every performance had to meet impossible standards. Millions of fans celebrated his achievements, but very few understood the pressure that accompanied such extraordinary success. Behind the bright lights and cheering crowds, important sacrifices were beginning to take shape. The public saw the awards, the sold-out venues, and the smiling superstar standing under the spotlight. What they could not see were the growing personal costs that fame was beginning to demand. And as Garth Brooks reached heights few artists had ever achieved, a far more complicated chapter of his story was waiting just beyond the horizon. The world saw a superstar on top of the industry, but the sacrifices behind that success were only beginning to surface. By the early 1990s, Garth Brooks had become one of the biggest stars in music. His albums were selling by the millions. Concert tickets disappeared within hours. Fans traveled across states just to see him perform. Country music had produced successful artists before, but Brooks seemed to be operating on an entirely different level. Everywhere he went, people knew his name. His success was no longer limited to country music audiences. Mainstream media followed his every move. Television appearances became common. Magazine covers featured his image. Record executives celebrated every new milestone. From the outside, it looked like a dream life. But behind the scenes, the reality was far more complicated. Success on that scale came with enormous demands. Touring became a way of life. Months were spent traveling from city to city. One night, he might be performing in Texas. The next week, he could be standing on a stage thousands of miles away. Hotels replaced home. Airports became familiar territory. The crowds kept growing. So did the expectations. Each performance required tremendous energy. Fans expected excitement. They expected unforgettable moments. They expected the same passion every single night. And Brooks delivered. As the audience watched, he sprinted across stages, interacted with fans, and poured everything he had into each show. He wanted every person in the building to feel like they were witnessing something special. That dedication helped make him a superstar. It also came at a cost. While his career continued climbing, his personal life faced increasing pressure. At home, his family was experiencing the realities of life connected to fame. Brooks had married Sandy Mal in 1986, years before he became a global star. Together they built a family and welcomed 3 daughters. Like many couples, they had dreams for the future. But few families are prepared for the challenges that accompany worldwide fame. Long periods away from home became common. Important moments were sometimes missed. Family responsibilities often had to compete with career obligations. The schedule rarely slowed down. For Brooks, the conflict was becoming impossible to ignore. On one side stood a career that millions of artists could only dream about. On the other stood his role as a husband and father. Balancing both was becoming increasingly difficult. As his daughters grew older, the reality became even clearer. Children do not measure time the same way adults do. Weeks and months away from home felt much longer. Every missed birthday, school event, or family gathering carried emotional weight. Meanwhile, the music industry continued demanding more. New albums had to be recorded. Promotional appearances had to be completed. Tours had to be planned. there was always another obligation waiting. At the same time, Brooks faced another challenge that many famous performers experience. Success created pressure to remain successful. Every album was compared to the one before it. Every tour had to break new records. Every achievement raised expectations even higher. For many artists, reaching the top is difficult. Staying there can be even harder. Brooks found himself carrying the weight of an entire industry. Record labels expected results. Promoters expected packed venues. Fans expected perfection. The pressure never completely disappeared. Even during moments of celebration, there was often another goal waiting ahead. Yet despite these challenges, Brooks continued delivering remarkable success. Albums such as Rope in the Wind, The Chase, and In Pieces dominated charts throughout the decade. His popularity seemed unstoppable. The numbers were extraordinary. Millions of records sold. Countless awards won. Historic concert attendance figures achieved. Still, the emotional cost continued growing. Friends and colleagues noticed how seriously Brooks took his responsibilities as a father. While audiences saw the entertainer, those close to him saw someone increasingly concerned about the impact his career might be having on his family. The conflict became more personal with each passing year. By the late 1990s, he was facing questions that could no longer be postponed. How much success was enough? What mattered most? Could a person remain fully committed to both family and superstardom? These questions followed him everywhere. Standing before massive crowds, he continued performing with unmatched energy. Yet away from the spotlight, difficult decisions were beginning to form. The public remained focused on records, awards, and ticket sales. Few realized that one of the most important choices of his life was approaching. A choice that would shock fans around the world. Many assumed Garth Brooks would continue dominating country music for decades without interruption. After all, why would someone leave at the height of success? Why walk away when the dream was still alive? Those questions would soon have answers. And when the moment arrived, it would become one of the most surprising decisions in modern music history. Soon, Brooks would face a decision that shocked the music industry and changed everything. By the end of the 1990s, Garth Brooks had achieved almost everything a musician could dream of. He had broken sales records. He had performed before enormous crowds. He had become one of the most successful artists in American history. To millions of fans, it seemed impossible to imagine country music without him. Yet behind the scenes, a major decision was taking shape. The pressure that had been building for years was finally reaching a turning point. Brooks had spent much of the previous decade traveling constantly. Tours stretched across months. Recording sessions filled the gaps between performances. Public appearances, interviews, and promotional events consumed much of the remaining time. The schedule rarely stopped. While the world celebrated his success, he found himself increasingly focused on something else. His family. His 3 daughters were growing up. The years were moving quickly. Important moments were passing. And Brooks knew that time could never be recovered. For someone who valued family deeply, the realization carried enormous emotional weight. The conflict between career and home life had become impossible to ignore. He had spent years giving everything to his audiences. Now he faced a different question. Could he continue doing that while also being the father he wanted to be? The answer was not simple. Walking away from a career at its peak went against everything the entertainment industry expected. Most performers spend their entire lives chasing success. Few willingly step away once they achieve it. Yet Brooks began considering a path few people anticipated. In October 2000, he made a stunning announcement. He would retire from recording and touring. The news spread quickly across the country. Fans were shocked. Industry leaders were surprised. Many struggled to understand the decision. At just 38 years old, Brooks remained one of the biggest names in music. His concerts still sold out. His albums still generated enormous interest. There was no obvious reason to leave, at least not from the outside. For Brooks, however, the decision was deeply personal. He explained that his daughters needed him. He wanted to be present during their childhood years. He wanted to attend school events, family gatherings, and everyday moments that fame had often forced him to miss. It was not a decision based on declining popularity. It was a decision based on priorities. As cameras flashed and headlines appeared across newspapers, Brooks stepped away from the spotlight. For many artists, retirement brings a sense of finality. For Brooks, it marked the beginning of a very different chapter. Life away from constant touring felt unfamiliar. The crowds disappeared. The nightly performances stopped. The intense pace that had defined much of his adult life suddenly slowed. At first, the change offered relief. He could spend more time at home. He could focus on being a father rather than a superstar. Simple family moments became the center of daily life. However, adjusting to such a dramatic change was not always easy. For years, Brooks had lived in front of audiences. Performing was more than a job. It had become part of his identity. The excitement of a live crowd, the connection with fans, and the energy of the stage had shaped much of who he was. Stepping away required a major personal adjustment. Meanwhile, changes were also occurring in his personal life. His marriage to Sandy Mal faced increasing difficulties. Years of balancing fame, family responsibilities, and personal pressures had left their mark. In 2001, Brooks and Mal officially divorced after 15 years of marriage. The separation attracted significant media attention. For many fans, it was another reminder that even extraordinary success could not protect someone from personal heartbreak. Despite the challenges, Brooks remained committed to his daughters. Throughout the following years, he focused much of his energy on raising them and staying involved in their lives. The decision that once shocked the world began to make more sense. He was keeping the promise he had made. He was choosing family first. Still, the music never completely disappeared. Fans continued listening to his songs. His influence remained strong throughout the industry. New generations discovered his music. Requests for a comeback never stopped. Wherever he went, people asked the same question. Would Garth Brooks ever return? For years, the answer remained uncertain. The future seemed impossible to predict. The man who had once dominated country music was now living a quieter life far from the constant spotlight. Yet major changes were still ahead. As time passed, Brooks found himself reflecting on everything he had experienced. The success, the sacrifices, the family moments, the personal losses. And while retirement had given him valuable time with those he loved most, life would soon bring new emotional challenges that no amount of fame could prevent. The next chapter would reveal a side of Garth Brooks that many fans never fully saw. A chapter shaped not by records or awards, but by loss, grief, and the painful realities that touch every human life. Just when it seemed he had found peace away from the spotlight, another chapter of heartbreak and challenge was waiting. To many fans, Garth Brooks seemed to have found balance. He had stepped away from the relentless pace of superstardom. He was spending time with his daughters. The spotlight no longer controlled every moment of his life. From a distance, it appeared that he had escaped the pressures that once surrounded him. But life has a way of bringing challenges that no amount of fame can prevent. Behind the scenes, Brooks faced emotional struggles that were far removed from sold-out arenas and chart-topping albums. Like countless families across America, he experienced moments of loss, uncertainty, and heartbreak. These were the kinds of struggles that never appeared on concert tickets or album covers. They were deeply personal, and they would leave a lasting impact on the man behind the music. Throughout his life, Brooks had often spoken about the importance of family. The values he learned growing up in Oklahoma remained central to who he was. Success had changed many parts of his life, but it had not changed what mattered most to him. That made personal loss especially painful. As the years passed, Brooks experienced the reality that every family eventually faces. Loved ones grew older. Friends came and went. Time moved forward, whether anyone was ready for it or not. These moments often forced him to reflect on how quickly life can change. For someone who had spent decades performing before millions of people, the private moments became increasingly meaningful. The simple things carried greater importance. Family dinners, phone calls, time spent with children, conversations that might once have been delayed because of touring schedules. Life had taught him that these moments were precious. As his daughters matured and began building lives of their own, Brooks found himself entering another phase of life. The responsibilities of parenthood were changing. The years he had stepped away from the spotlight had passed faster than expected. Looking back, he could see how quickly childhood had disappeared. The choice he made in 2000 suddenly seemed even more significant. Yet while those years brought meaningful family memories, they also brought reminders of how fragile life can be. Loss has a way of changing perspective. It reshapes priorities. It makes achievements feel smaller and relationships feel larger. For Brooks, these lessons became increasingly clear. The excitement of breaking records no longer carried the same importance it once had. What mattered was the people who shared life's journey. At the same time, he faced another burden familiar to many public figures. Even during difficult personal moments, public attention never completely disappeared. Fans continued following his life. Media outlets continued reporting on his career. People expected him to remain the same energetic performer they remembered from years earlier. But behind every famous face is a human being experiencing the same emotions as everyone else. Grief does not disappear because someone is successful. Heartbreak does not become easier because someone is wealthy. Loss affects everyone. Brooks understood that reality more deeply with each passing year. There were also moments when public controversy and criticism added additional pressure. Fame often places people under constant scrutiny. Every decision is analyzed. Every statement is examined. Every personal challenge becomes public discussion. For someone who valued privacy and family, those realities could be exhausting. Yet Brooks continued moving forward. Those close to him often described his resilience. Through personal difficulties, professional changes, and emotional hardships, he remained committed to the people who mattered most. Faith also played an important role during difficult times. Throughout various stages of his life, Brooks often relied on faith as a source of strength and guidance. It provided comfort during uncertain moments and helped him navigate challenges that could not be solved through success alone. As the years moved forward, something became increasingly clear. The greatest lessons of his life had not come from fame. They had come from hardship. The sold-out concerts were unforgettable. The awards were meaningful. The records were historic. But loss had taught him different lessons. Lessons about gratitude. Lessons about family. Lessons about appreciating time before it slips away. Those experiences changed the way he viewed success. They also prepared him for something unexpected. Because despite the years away from full-time touring, despite the personal challenges, and despite the emotional burdens he had carried, another remarkable chapter was about to begin. The stage that once seemed far behind him would soon return. Fans who had waited years would finally get the moment they hoped for. And Garth Brooks was about to discover that some journeys are not finished when people think they are. Sometimes they are only entering a new beginning. But despite everything he had endured, an unexpected comeback was about to rewrite the story once again. For nearly a decade, Garth Brooks had lived a very different life from the one that made him famous. The man who once filled stadiums around the world had stepped away from the spotlight to focus on family. Many believed his years as a touring superstar were over. But country music fans never forgot him. His songs continued playing on radio stations. His albums continued selling. New listeners discovered his music while longtime fans held onto memories of unforgettable performances. And wherever Brooks went, one question followed him. Would he ever return? As the years passed, that possibility slowly became more realistic. His daughters were growing older. The promise he made to be present during their childhood had largely been fulfilled. Life was entering a new stage. At the same time, the connection between Brooks and his audience remained remarkably strong. Few artists in any genre had inspired such loyalty. The demand for his return never disappeared. Then, little by little, the comeback began. In 2009, Brooks performed a special series of shows in Las Vegas. The performances were far different from the massive stadium concerts of his earlier years. The setting was more intimate. The atmosphere was personal. For fans, it was a rare opportunity to see him again. For Brooks, it was a chance to reconnect with the music he loved. As audiences watched, the years seemed to melt away. The voice remained familiar. The storytelling remained powerful, and the bond with the crowd was as strong as ever. The response was overwhelming. It became clear that the connection between Garth Brooks and his fans had survived the years apart. Soon, larger opportunities followed. The country music landscape had changed dramatically since his retirement. New stars had emerged. Technology had transformed the industry. Social media now played a major role in connecting artists and audiences. Yet Brooks remained relevant. His influence